So we're going to get started with our winter magic number 1. You can make your background using our white crayon because that's what we're working on. White crayon resist. You can make it using angles, straight line, curved lines, parts of letters, whatever you want. You can add trees if you so choose, or mountains or hills. Perfect for sledding. You can even add a little bit of water. So I'm going to get started down at the bottom. You add however you want. We cannot make any mistakes. And so I'm going to kind of, and it's hard to see, wind it around. And I'm going to make a little bit of a C type shape, but I'm going to stop about midpoint into my paper because I want to leave some room for some sky. So I'll add a little bit more there and a little more there. So it looks like it came from an angle. Now I'm going to go to the other side and I'm going to come in. I'm going to jag it in. And again, I have to end about right here, or at least at that same kind of point. So I have that. Now, I love mountains, so I'm going to add some mountains into my background. And I'm just going to do that by making some V shapes. In fact, I'm going to actually use purple. So I'm going to start off with some little mountains because if they're in the distance, they're going to be little. If they're up close, right, they will be bigger. Add a medium-sized one, and we'll do a little bit over here, because those are in the distance. I think I might also add a little bit of trees. But because it's winter, I'm going to kind of add it with gray, just because we know that everything looks so dark at times, especially things like trees. So I'm just going to add, and I'm going to kind of sweep it down. And I'll add a little tree back here. Because remember, it's in the back, so it probably should be a little smaller, right? I will add another one up here. This one's going to be bigger because it's closer. And it's okay if my crayons kind of go into one another. And I might add a little bit of green. Not a lot, because I'll add that in my paints too. But they kind of have a mixture, don't they? And we're going to just kind of make some lines within my snowy area, even though it's kind of hard to see. We'll just add a little bit. And then I'm also going to do one more thing. I am going to make it look like it's snowing out. So I'm just going to add some dashes with my crayon. Oops, and it even smeared, but that's okay. Now, are we ready to try and see what happens next? We're going to get ready for our paints. So you want to make sure you have your 2 paint brushes. You should have a flat brush and some kind of a round brush. You want to make sure you have water, your paints, and a paper towel. See you in just a minute. To get started, we need to first add, I'm just going to use the paintbrush that was in with my paints. I'm going to add just a little bit of water because we're going to start on the sky. So I'm going to add some blues. And then really you want to make sure you rinse that out. And I'm just adding water to my paints. So right now my colors are going to kind of be purple and blues, maybe some little bit of yellows and some red into the mix. So you can see I've just added a little drop, but before we even do that, we're going to learn a special technique, and that we're going to use it just for the sky. And so I'm going to take my paper towel, I'm going to wet it, and I'm going to just paint the sky with my paper towel because I want my paper to be wet, not soaking wet so it easily tears, but I don't want to have to work too hard today to paint. So if I wet my paper first, the colors will all blend together on their own. So are we ready to see some magic? I'm going to start with a little purple, and I'm just going to dab it in there. And you can see how they're starting to run. I'm going to rinse it out a little bit more, and I probably, have to be honest, probably need a little bit more water. So I'm going to dab it in. This paper kind of likes to soak it up. Then I'm going to add, I've cleaned out my brush. I'm going to add some water. Look at that. Isn't that cool to just see how it... So I'm just going to dab it wherever I want. And as soon as I'm done with that color, clean it out. I'm going to, and I think we'll add a little bit of blue. Let's see what happens with the blue. Did it go? Not quite as much, did it? So let's see what happens. So I've just added a little bit more water to it. Oh, there we go. Let's add some more purple. I'm going to make sure my purple is also kind of runny. And I didn't do a big sky, but I want to try to get all of my nooks and crannies. Do you see where that water has kind of gone away? That's because I used that white crayon, remember? So I have a little bit. Okay, I'm going to dry that. Now, if that is too wet for you, we can leave it to soak it in. If you want, you can just very gently go over it with your paper towel and just kind of soak up some of that. I'm not going to soak it all up. So that, ladies and gentlemen, are the sky. You might have noticed when you're outside and you're looking at the sky, sometimes the ground almost picks up the colors, doesn't it, of the sky. So we're going to try to do that a little bit. This time I'm going to use my round brush, but I'm not going to wet my paper first. I'm just going to kind of go in there, and I know I have a spot where I wanted some water, so I'm going to just see if I can find out where that is. So I'm going to wet my blue paper, and I'm just going to, oops, probably a little too dry. So I'm just going to wet that in here. And let's see what happens. Now, if I want that to reflect into my sky, or reflect from my sky, I'm going to add just a little bit of purple, right? Oh, see, that even made that body of water really dark. Then I'm cleaning out my brush, add some red to that. And if I made that a little too wet, I can just take my paper towel and I can pick it up. Just dab it a little bit more. And I think it's kind of starting to look like the sky. Now, I'm going to go in and kind of paint my mountains. And I'm going to use like a dark, I'm going to blend a dark purple, I think, to it. And let's see what happens. See, and there again was our snow that was coming down. And remember, if there's something I don't like, I can always, once it dries, I can go back and change it a little bit, add some other colors. Okay, let's see what this does. I'm going to add a little bit of some really dark red, brown, after I sponge it, because I did get it pretty wet. Look at that. That makes a really neat looking technique, doesn't it? See, I don't have to do too much because it just blends in. I think I'm going to make my water just a little darker. So I'm going to add a little bit of purple and some blue together. There. And I can take and I can make waves. So it looks like it's going up into the mountains. Just like that. Now I'm going to take my brush and work on my trees a little bit. So I'm going to add some green. And just kind of fill in those spaces. And because during the winter time, again, it looks so dark, right, with the trees, I think I'm going to add some black to it. So we'll start over here. Yep, that made it a little darker, just what I wanted. I like having those little grooves in there, that texture where the crayon just kind of repels. Now, what do you think, guys and gals, is left to paint? It's the ground, isn't it? And it's already, I know my place is kind of a snowy color, so I'm going to just really lightly, probably I think what I will do is actually wet my ground. Oops, I think I'll use my brush, because I just want very light color. So I'm gonna do more. Let's see what happens if I add just a little bit. Oops, I might have added too much. It's gonna add a little bit of gray, but I might need to also add some blue. Sometimes there's kind of a blue tinge, isn't there, to some of the snow, especially if it's sparkling. Now I will go back and I'm gonna pick that up with my paper towel. Yeah, I'm okay with that. Because it kind of, yeah, I'm okay. Might not have been exactly how I imagined it, but you know what? Not a big deal. I like the effect. So now I'm going to go to the other side, paint in my white spaces with water. Add some of that black. And now I go back and I'm going to add really watery, that blue. Cleaned off my brush. Now I'll go in and pick up those colors I don't necessarily want a lot of. And there is my first winter magic scene. Now, if I am really, really little, I probably might not do all of that, right? But here's what I would do. I'm going to take my white crayon. So if I'm really little, I'm just going to make zigzag lines all over. And I'm going to color that in as much as I can. And if I want it to look like it's snowing, remember I can do some dashes. I'm going to start with the sky, and I really liked using my paintbrush. So I'm going to just get my top of my paper wet. Add in some purples. Clean off my brush. Add in some reds. Oh, look at how that moves. That is just fun. And I'm going to use a light blue this time. So I'll take my paper towel, because it's very, very wet, and I'm going to just pick that up. And then I'm going to paint my bottom. And I'm going to stick, boys and girls, look at all my different. So I'm wetting my paper. This is called wet on wet. And I'm going to add, oops, let's go with the dark. I'm going to go with the darker blue. I'm going to add my black now to it. Again, I'm really making sure it's wet. And I'm pulling it all the way up from the sky. See, I've kind of got my mountains, or my rugged land. And this time I think I'm going to add just a little bit of some green. Because remember, we really can't make anything go wrong. Clean out my brush. And now I will stamp it again. There. So I have some hills, some mountains, some rugged land, and I have my sky.